If you enjoy real horror stories, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. It really helps us keep bringing these creepy stories to you. And at the end, leave a comment, tell us what you thought, or if you've ever experienced something similar. Now turn off the lights, and good luck. I just moved into my first apartment alone, and money was tight. When I saw the Craigslist ad for a couch, like new, barely used $100, it felt like a miracle. The photos showed a clean gray sectional, the exact kind I'd been eyeing at stores but couldn't afford. I emailed the seller, a guy named Mark, and he replied within minutes. But there was a catch. He refused to meet anywhere except his place, and he insisted on delivering it himself. That should have been my first red flag, but desperation made me stupid. I gave him my address, rationalizing that plenty of people do furniture pickups at homes. Still, something about his tone, too eager, too insistent, made my stomach twist. Delivery day came, and I drove to his house, a rundown bungalow with peeling paint and a yard full of weeds. Mark was middle-aged, with a forced smile that didn't reach his eyes. He led me inside, and the smell hit me first. Mildew and something metallic, like old coins. The couch was shoved in a dim corner, and in person, it was nothing like the photos. The fabric was torn along one arm, and dark stains blotched the cushions. When I hesitated, his voice turned slick. "Price is negotiable," he said, leaning too close. "Maybe we can work something else out." The way he looked at me, like I was the thing he'd actually been selling, sent a cold jolt down my spine. I mumbled an excuse and bolted. The whole drive home, my hands wouldn't stop shaking on the wheel. I kept replaying that look in his eyes, like he'd already decided something about me. I locked my apartment door behind me and tried to shake it off. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe he was just a creep, but not dangerous. Still, I shoved a chair under the doorknob that night, something I'd never done before. I told myself I'd block his number, forget the whole thing. But then, around 11 p.m., I heard it. A slow, deliberate scrape against the front door, like someone testing the lock. My blood turned to ice. I muted the TV and held my breath. The scraping stopped, but a second later, the gate in my backyard squeaked open, then shut, then open again, like someone was pacing, deciding. I grabbed my phone, fingers trembling so badly I could barely dial 911. The dispatcher said they'd send a car, but it felt like hours, not minutes. Outside, footsteps crunched on gravel, circling the house. Then silence. The cops found nothing, no one. But I knew. He'd followed me home. He knew where I lived. And worst of all, he wanted me to know he was there. The cops left after a half-assed search, telling me to call if anything else happens. Like I hadn't just heard someone stalking my damn house. I didn't sleep. Every creak of the apartment settling made my heart jackhammer. Around 3 a.m., my phone buzzed, a block number. Just one word, comfy. I threw it across the room like it burned me. That couch. He knew I hadn't bought it, hadn't let him inside. Was this his way of saying he'd get in anyway? I spent the rest of the night with every light on, a knife in my lap, staring at the door like it might explode open any second. Morning didn't make it better. I called my landlord to change the locks, but he brushed me off, said I was paranoid. I bought a deadbolt myself and installed it crooked, hands still shaking. Work was a blur. All day, I kept checking over my shoulder, half expecting to see Mark leaning against a wall, grinning. When I got home, I almost screamed. My backyard gate was wide open. I knew I'd locked it. Inside, nothing was stolen, nothing moved. But the air smelled wrong. Stale sweat, and that same metallic tinge from his house. And on my kitchen counter, a single key. Not mine. I called the cops again. But what was I supposed to say? A key appeared in my house, and I think it's from the couch guy. They took a report, but I could tell they thought I was hysterical. That night, I stayed at a friend's place, too scared to even grab clothes from my apartment. The next morning, I went back with my friend Jake for backup. Everything looked normal, until I checked the couch I already owned. Tucked between the cushions was a folded receipt from a diner I'd never been to. On the back, in smudged ink, "You should have taken the deal." I tore the apartment apart looking for signs of him. Hidden cameras, unlocked windows, anything. Nothing. But the worst part? The smell wouldn't go away. That metallic, almost coppery stench lingered in my bedroom, like something had been left there. I washed the sheets, sprayed the air, even checked under the bed. Then I saw it, a single muddy shoe print on the windowsill. Too big to be mine. The window was locked from the inside, but the screen had been slit open, just enough for a hand to reach in. He'd been here, while I was gone. While I was sleeping, I packed a bag and stayed at Jake's for a week, too terrified to go home. When I finally went back, the apartment felt wrong, like the air itself was heavier. I hired a locksmith to change every lock, added security bars to the windows, even bought a cheap camera for the front door. For a while, nothing happened. No calls, no notes, no signs of him. I started to think maybe it was over. Then, one rainy night, my doorbell rang at 2 a.m. The camera feed showed nothing but static, like someone had covered the lens. And then, 3 slow knocks. Not on the door. On the window behind me. I didn't scream. I didn't move. I just stood there, frozen, listening to the rain and the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. The knocking came again, closer this time, like it had moved to the bedroom window. I grabbed my phone, ready to smash 911 when the power went out. The camera feed died. The hum of the fridge stopped. Complete silence. Then, from the direction of my couch, a creak, like someone had just sat down. I don't remember running out of the apartment, just the cold rain on my face and the sound of my own choked sobs as I called the police from a neighbor's porch. The cops found nothing, again. No fingerprints, no broken locks, no sign anyone had been inside. The power came back on as soon as they arrived, like some sick joke. They suggested a stress evaluation and left. I didn't go back. I broke my lease, left half my stuff behind, and moved across town. For months, I jumped at every knock, every wrong number call. Then, one day, I got an email notification. Craigslist had removed Mark's account for suspicious activity. I clicked the cached listing out of morbid curiosity. The photo of the couch was different now. In the background, barely visible, was the edge of a bookshelf. My bookshelf. That photo had been taken in my apartment, that I never found out who he was or what he wanted. The police closed the case with no leads. Sometimes I wonder if I imagined it all. The smells, the sounds, the key. But then I remember the way that couch felt when I finally touched it in his house. Damp, like something had seeped deep into the fabric. And I think about how he must have stood in my apartment, taking pictures, breathing in my space while I wasn't there. The worst part? I still see that couch sometimes. In thrift stores, on sidewalks, even in dreams. Always the same tears, the same stains. And every time, I run. I still remember how desperate I was to land my first job after graduation. I'd spent weeks sending out resumes, refreshing my inbox every 5 minutes, and jumping at every notification. So when I saw that Craigslist ad for a marketing assistant position, decent pay, flexible hours, no experience needed, I didn't think twice before replying. The response came almost instantly, just a short email asking me to meet at an address the next day for an informal interview. I should have been suspicious when they didn't mention a company name or ask for references, but I was too excited to care. The address led me to a quiet residential street, the kind where you'd expect families, not offices. The house looked normal enough, a faded blue paint job, overgrown bushes, but something felt off the second I stepped onto the porch. The front door was slightly ajar, like someone had been waiting for me. When I knocked, a man's voice called out, "Come in," but there was no face to match it. The second I crossed the threshold, I heard the door click shut behind me. Not a normal click, like the sound of a lock turning. My stomach dropped, but I told myself I was just paranoid. The inside of the house smelled like mildew and something metallic, like old pennies. The lights were dim, just a single lamp in the corner, casting long shadows across peeling wallpaper. A man, I assumed he was the interviewer, sat at a small table in what should have been a living room. No desk, no computer, just him and a notepad. He didn't smile when I sat down. His eyes never left me, not even when he reached over to adjust something behind him. That's when I noticed the chairs stacked against the wall, one of them tipped over like it had been knocked down in a hurry. The interview started normal enough. Name, education, basic stuff, but then the questions got weird. Do you live alone? What's your daily routine? Do you have family nearby? His voice stayed flat, like he was reading from a script. I kept my answers vague, but my hands were shaking under the table. Then I saw it. A padlock on the hallway door, the kind you'd use on a storage shed. My pulse spiked. This wasn't just sketchy, it was wrong. I forced a smile and said I needed to use the bathroom, praying he wouldn't stop me. He just nodded toward the hallway, and that's when I saw the second locked door. The bathroom was tiny, the air thick with the smell of bleach and something sour underneath. My reflection in the mirror looked pale, my pupils huge. I turned on the faucet to cover the sound of my breathing while I tried to think. That's when I noticed scratches on the inside of the door, deep gouges near the handle, like someone had clawed at it. My throat went dry. I pressed my ear to the door and heard footsteps pacing outside, slow and deliberate. No phone signal, no window, just a vent too small to crawl through. I splashed water on my face and told myself, "Get out now." When I opened the door, the hallway was empty, but the padlocked door was slightly ajar now. A cold draft seeped out, carrying a whiff of rot. My shoes squeaked on the linoleum as I edged toward the front door, heart slamming against my ribs. Then I heard it, a muffled thump from behind the locked door, like something heavy being dragged. The interviewer's voice came from the living room. "You forgot your bag." A test. If I turned back, I was trapped. I bolted. The front door was heavier than it should have been, but I wrenched it open and ran without looking back. I didn't stop running until I hit the main road, my lungs burning, heels blistering from my stupid interview shoes. A car honked as I stumbled into the street, but I barely registered it. I kept glancing back, expecting to see him chasing me, but the street stayed empty. The house looked normal from a distance, just another rundown suburban home. That was the worst part. No one would have guessed what was inside. I fumbled for my phone, hands shaking so badly I dropped it twice before managing to call a rideshare. The driver took one look at me and asked if I needed the hospital. I reported it to the police, but without proof, it was just my word against an empty house. By the time they checked, the place was cleared out. No furniture, no padlocks, just dust and a faint smell of bleach. They said the Craigslist ad was already deleted, untraceable. For weeks, I jumped at every knock on my door, triple-checked every window lock. I couldn't shake the thought. How many others walked in there and didn't walk out? The worst part? I'll never know if it was just some sicko's game or something bigger. Sometimes I still see blue houses in my dreams, and the door's always open. For months afterward, I obsessively checked missing person reports, scanning faces for anyone who looked like they might have answered the same ad. I found a forum thread about fake job listings used to lure people, mostly women, mostly young. A few comments mentioned a blue house, but the details were always just different enough to make me doubt myself. Was it the same guy? A copycat? My therapist said I was fixating, but how do you just stop when you know something like that is out there, hunting? I tried to go back once. Not inside, just driving past. The house was still there, but the blue paint had been covered with a cheap coat of beige, like someone wanted to erase it. "Of for rent" sign hung crooked in the yard. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, staring at the front door, half expecting it to creak open. Nothing happened. No shadows moved. No padlocks glinted in the sunlight. It was just a house. That's what terrified me most, how ordinary evil could look. I changed my phone number, scrubbed my online presence, and told every new grad I met to avoid Craigslist jobs. But the paranoia stuck. Even now, I can't walk into a real interview without scanning the room for exits, testing the weight of the door behind me. Once, a hiring manager asked if I was okay because I kept glancing at the clock like I was counting down to something. I didn't know how to explain that I was. Years later, I still don't have answers. No arrests, no viral Reddit expose, no closure. Just a handful of nightmares and the gut-deep certainty that I got lucky. Whatever that house was, it's still out there. Maybe repainted, maybe relist, but waiting. And the worst part? It doesn't need me to remember. It just needs someone else desperate enough to ignore the red flags. I was desperate. After months of searching for an affordable place in the city, I stumbled upon a Craigslist listing that seemed too good to be true, a one-bedroom apartment for half the usual rent. The photos looked decent, if a little outdated, but I was in no position to be picky. The landlord, a guy named Richard, responded almost instantly, his messages short and weirdly pushy. He insisted I come see it that same day, which should have been my first red flag. But when you're one missed paycheck away from sleeping in your car, you ignore the gut feeling telling you to run. The house was an old, two-story building in a neighborhood so quiet it felt abandoned. Richard was waiting outside, a middle-aged guy with this forced smile that didn't reach his eyes. He barely let me inside before launching into this rehearsed speech about how high demand the place was, pressuring me to put down a deposit right then. The tour was rushed. He avoided certain rooms, claiming they were under renovation, and kept steering me back toward the living room. The whole time, I felt like I was being watched, but I chalked it up to nerves. Stupid, I know that I signed the lease that night. The place was mine, and for the first week, I convinced myself I'd scored the deal of a lifetime. But then little things started creeping in, things I couldn't explain, like coming home to find the bathroom door wide open when I knew I'd shut it, or my toothbrush being just slightly off-center in the cup, like someone had picked it up and put it back wrong. I told myself it was the old house settling, or maybe my own exhaustion playing tricks on me. But then I'd catch myself freezing mid-step, listening for sounds that shouldn't be there. A faint creak upstairs, a rustle in the hallway when I was the only one home. The worst was the smell. Every few days, this stale, almost metallic odor would seep into the bedroom at night, like old copper and damp carpet. I tore the place apart looking for mold, a dead rat, anything. Nothing. Then one morning, I woke up to find my kitchen knives rearranged in the drawer, not drastically, but enough to notice. The big chef's knife was now at the front, blade facing out, like it had been used and put back in a hurry. That's when the paranoia really set in. I started checking locks obsessively, even setting up my phone to record the apartment while I was gone. But the footage never showed anything, just empty rooms and silence. About a month in, I finally snapped. I was washing dishes when I noticed one of those generic "Live, Laugh, Love" wall decals near the ceiling had a tiny, almost invisible hole in it. I grabbed a chair to get a closer look, and that's when I saw it, a lens. Not some cheap spy cam, but a professional-grade pinhole camera wired straight into the wall. My stomach dropped. I tore the decal off and found two more in the bedroom, hidden behind framed posters. The wiring ran along the baseboards, disappearing into the walls like veins. That's when it hit me. This wasn't some amateur setup. Whoever did this had access before I ever moved in. I called the cops, but they treated it like a prank. "You sure you didn't install these yourself?" one officer actually asked me. Richard stopped answering my calls. The property management company listed on the lease turned out to be a shell corporation. I packed a bag that night, but as I was leaving, I noticed the front door deadbolt, scratches all around the keyhole, fresh ones. Someone had been trying to get in. Or worse, they already had a key. I slept in my car for a week after that, too afraid to go back inside. But here's the thing that still fucks with me. When I finally hired a locksmith to retrieve my stuff, every single camera was gone. No wires, no holes in the walls. Just empty spaces where they'd been, like they never existed at all. The locksmith was the first person who actually seemed to believe me. He took one look at the door frame and pointed out fresh tool marks. Someone had tampered with the lock recently. As we walked through the apartment, he kept pausing at random spots, running his fingers along the walls. "You ever notice any weird buzzing noises? Like electrical interference?" he asked. I hadn't, but then again, I'd been too focused on the cameras. He told me about a job he'd done a few years back where the entire ceiling was rigged with mics, the kind that pick up vibrations through glass. I didn't sleep for days after that. I moved out the next morning, leaving most of my stuff behind. The few things I took with me, clothes, my laptop, I inspected inch by inch. Found nothing, but that didn't stop me from smashing my alarm clock with a hammer just in case. For months afterward, I'd catch myself scanning rooms for tiny lenses, checking my phone for weird background noise. The worst part? About a year later, I drove past the place on a whim. New tenant was moving in. Some kid carrying boxes, looking hopeful. I almost rolled down my window to warn him. But what would I even say? That the walls had eyes? That the cheap rent came with something worse than roaches? He'd have thought I was crazy. Maybe I was. But I still dream about that smell sometimes. That copper and damp stench creeping into my lungs the second I let my guard down.